There you are. So we're going to go ahead and we are recording our meeting here tonight to help with our note-taking record keeping. We also anticipate the possibility of putting this online on the city's website or through their social media channels for others who weren't able to join us here tonight. So again, I want to officially and now formally welcome you and thank you for being here tonight. My name is Andy Pendoli. I'm part of the project team the city has assembled to conduct the Climate Change Adaptation and Resiliency Measures to Address Coastal Flooding project. This is the first public workshop for this process. We're very much still in the early stages of this process. So glad you're here and to help us and be involved. And we do have, as I mentioned, we have an extensive amount of information to go over with you here tonight, but we also have a lot of opportunities for you to interact and ask questions. And we have questions for you too. So look forward to being involved and providing input to us, key points in the workshop. So thank you in advance for that. So again, just real briefly, I think we've got, just want to make sure the screen share is working properly here. I think everybody should be able to see my screen right with the Zoom tools. Can I? Good, thank you, Joey, to confirm that. So again, Zoom tools, I think everybody here has seen this, so I won't pour over this more. But again, looking forward to receiving your comments over chat in particular. But you can also use the raise hand feature and we'll be able to unmute you at certain times. Well, let's get into the program here. And before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to introduce Doug Krause with the city, and he's going to provide some welcoming remarks on behalf of the city, give you a really high level overview why we're here and doing this process, and then we'll get started. So Doug, take it away.
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, again, my name is Doug Krause. I'm the city's environmental program manager and leading this project. The city applied for and was successful in getting a Caltrans grant for approximately $250,000 to fund this project. And the Caltrans grant has a focus on climate adaptation planning. And so what the city did was we had three previously identified capital improvement projects, which you'll hear more about, all basically along Hermosa Avenue, that because they're on Hermosa Avenue and more or less at sea level, certainly needed to be designed with sea level rise, climate adaptation in mind. These capital improvement projects, they've been in the CIP for a little while. With this funding, with this project, what we'll be able to do is take them to tons of community outreach and get feedback from the community, which is essential to all major projects in town, but also incorporate climate adaptation into these, what previously would have been just good old-fashioned, street projects, roughly, right? But now they'll be able to be kind of smartly designed. And so out of this project, we'll come with design concepts, again, the community feedback and outreach that can then inform those capital improvement projects moving forward. So it's a good use of grant funding to take existing projects and get them moving forward, but also get them moving forward intelligently, again, with the consideration of climate adaptation. And so with that, I'll turn it back to the team. We advertised for consultants, got a few proposals, interviewed them all, and MIG was the one we chose, and they've been running fast on this, and we're looking forward to this first community meeting. We've had a few stakeholder meetings, but there'll be more of all of those, and by the end of this, we hope to have some very smart ideas for these projects.
All right, thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. So we are excited to be here too. As I mentioned, I'm part of the team that Doug just referenced, and in a moment, we're going to introduce to you our project manager. But before we do that, I just want to give you a sense of what we're going to cover tonight in the workshop. And so we've gone through the welcome remarks, and we'll get into more detail, giving you an overview of this project. What's the background and more of the drivers as to why we're here and what led the city to pursue that grant funding to be able to conduct this effort. And then we'll be able to answer any questions that you may have there. But then we also want to get into some initial findings that the team has been developing based on initial analysis that speak to, what might climate change and sea level rise be, you know, what are some potential scenarios for what that could look like, from some relatively lower risk to some extreme high risk scenarios. But then we particularly want to emphasize a lot of discussion with you. As I mentioned, we have questions that we want to ask you, about these initial findings and the purpose of this study and some of your initial ideas. And of course, our team is here to answer questions that you have to the greatest extent we can here tonight. Any questions we're not able to answer in more detail tonight, we'll be including in a summary document to encapsulate all the input we've heard, the proceedings that went on tonight, and we'll be uploading that to the city webpage in the future. And at some point in the chat, by the way, my colleague Joey Nielsen, as part of the project team, he'll put a link to the city's webpage for this project, so you can take a look and make sure you have that available to you. So Joey will get that up in the next 5 minutes or so. So in the meantime, that's our overview for our agenda. And what I want to do now is go ahead and introduce Jenny Zell with MIG. And she is our project manager on this effort, leading an extensive team of professionals here doing some really interesting advanced work. And Jenny's going to get us started giving just an overview on the project and the purpose. And we'll do a pause here, just probably about 10 minutes or so, to open it up to hear from any of you that have any questions just on the overarching purpose overall. So with that, Jenny, can you take it away?
All right. Thanks, Andy. So as both Doug and Andy have highlighted, the focus of this project is to reduce climate change impacts to this incredible natural and built resources in Hermosa Beach, and these impressive public infrastructure that really provides, access to these important resources, and resources utilized by the people of Hermosa Beach and the region for recreation and relaxation, places we love. And now more than ever, we're keenly aware of the value that these places have in their role as health infrastructure and how they contribute to the health and wellness of many. And these resources are the backbone. There we go. These resources are the backbone of the economic and cultural heart of the community, and they are exposed to flooding risks in their existing condition and with sea level rise projection scenarios. And so the really great news is that Hermosa Beach has this beautiful existing wide sandy beach. It provides natural protection from storms and a whole lot of real estate for beach visitors. And it also provides habitat value for other species like resident and migratory birds that fill up on those little invertebrates that live in this intertidal zone. But this is unlike some of the challenges faced in other nearby coastal cities. We're looking at Del Mar here, and these places have more beach narrowing and more coastal erosion challenges. So we're starting with the good news here. And we're also building on the hard work and the existing studies that's already been done by the city of Hermosa Beach, including the 2014 Sea Level Rise Vulnerability and Adaptation Assessment, along with the 2017 Hazard Mitigation Plan, the 2018 Storm Drain Master Plan. So these are our building blocks. And we're also building on other, as Doug mentioned, these other city priorities that have been identified in previous planning documents. And so what is the project, and what are we talking about specifically? And can you go back one, Andy? So we're looking at 3 different sites going from south in Hermosa Beach, going from south to north. The first site is they're all along Hermosa Avenue, but it starts at Gerondo Avenue, moves up to 4th Street. The second site is at basically right there at 26th Street. And the third site, the most northern site, is 35th, right there at the Strand and Hermosa Avenue. And as we mentioned, these are really the goals that are getting integrated into these project sites. And our project has two phases. It's a constraints analysis and conceptual design. And so we started the project in the spring of 2021, well, this year, with one of several site visits, and where we observed and evaluated the existing conditions. And we've also conducted a couple of stakeholder meetings. We've heard from different government and agency representatives and different community groups. And right now we're completing, as you see there on the left, we're completing our technical hydrological study that's based on the existing storm drain, and also a sea level rise review and local refinement. And so this is midsummer, and we're at our first public workshop, and where we're going to present these findings to you. And we're going to, once we get your feedback, we're going to begin the next phase in conceptual design. And that's where we're going to look at what these sort of adaptations are going to look like specific to Hermosa Beach. We're going to continue to meet with stakeholders. And then our next public meeting is going to be our draft conceptual design there in the fall. And our second public meeting will be final design. And it also included, and importantly included in this process, is a cost benefit analysis report. We've got a great people on board to help, understand the cost, the benefits, and also importantly, where could the funding come from? So a funding report, and all gets tied into another report, and the project completed in February of 2021. So that's really our process.
Great, thank you, Jenny. So we wanted to just pause here for those of you, and please go ahead and if you want to type any questions in the chat, or if you want to raise the blue hand or come on to the video and wave your real hand, it's fine. Do you have any questions about the project purpose and the background? Why the city's moving forward on this project before we get into more details about some of the initial findings? Any questions from anyone at this point? That's fine, and we can. You may have some questions that come up later in the workshop, and that's perfectly fine. You can ask more broader project background questions then. So let's go ahead and move on. We've got more time to hear from you, and Jenny, let's go ahead and keep rolling here with the next sections.
Okay, sure. So what will this project address? And the core again is increasing community resilience to coastal flooding impacts, and specifically flooding caused by a rain event, flooding caused by inundation from seawater, that's water coming up over the beach or sidewalks, flooding caused by seawater blocking storm drains. So to show you what some of these look like. So first, flooding caused by seawater backing the storm drains. This little diagram is showing you what happens when a high tide comes. It blocks this outfall and it can back it up into the streets. And you can see here, this is Hurando, is that big, huge outfall that's out there. And that inverts, the bottom of the pipe is at 4 feet. So potentially you can get backing up during high tides or during storms. We also have flooding caused by inundation from seawater. This is an image in Long Beach, it can be, this inundation can come at a high tide. This is a king tide here that you're seeing. The flooding can also be caused by inundation from seawater. This is an image of El Nino. I remember the 1983 El Nino when the Huntington Beach Pier fell, lots of damage. So that's another location of this type of flooding. And then flooding can caused by just rain events where this existing storm drain network gets overwhelmed and can't accommodate these volumes. And this is an image. The next image is in Long Beach, California, and it's a photo I took, I don't know, a couple of months ago. And you can see the water coming very near to electric pole, manhole. And so this illustrates with these higher sea levels, they can cause saltwater corrosion of these buried or exposed infrastructures like these sewer lines, storm drains. And also you've got beach narrowing, which reduces really the ability of that natural buffer to protect the seawall and other structures from wave energy or flooding. But the beach area also is a loss of beach where it can really negatively impact the local economy. This area you see here on a sunny day is usually filled with people, where it's now got water. And so what are the magnitudes of sea level rise that matter for specifically for Hermosa Beach? And our study is looking at 3 different scenarios varying from low to extremely high. So we're looking at 3.3 feet, 1 meter, 6.7 feet, and 16.4 feet, respectively. And so for all of us that are living near the coast, we want to know, and we want to know with certainty when and how high the oceans will rise. But that's a question, that certainty is not achievable, because the future depends on a lot of variables like emission scenarios, plate tectonics, melting ice, and really a lot of factors that are unknown or that science that I don't understand. But what we're illustrating in this table here is based on the state of California sea level rise guidance and the best available science for estimating that, we have basically a 1 in 6 chance of seeing a 3.3 feet of sea level rise by 2100. We have a 1 in 200 chance of seeing 3.3 feet of sea level rise by 2070. And we have a 1 in 200 chance of seeing 6.7 feet of sea level rise by 2100. So I'm hoping you'll remember these probabilities when we look at some of these next slides. We're not describing imminent scenarios here, but really a range of possibilities. For these extreme scenarios that we see here, like 3.3 feet of sea level rise by 2050, or this 16.4 feet in 110 years from now, there's no probability associated with these because of the extreme uncertainty of these scenarios. And really, we want to emphasize that these are a range of possible futures, and they're tools for planning. Like Doug said, they help in the decision-making process, and they help to guide policies and also guide the dedication of resources. And so this is Hermosa Beach. This is these different levels, 3.3, 6.7, and 16.4. And what these are predicted street level flooding boundaries, and they're based on the Coastal Storm Model System Cosmos version 3, phase 2, that's been developed, this fantastic modeling tool that's been developed by USGS. And again, the model is for planning purposes only. And so this next slide again shows our 3 sites, and also it also identifies some of these priorities that the city has for these different sites. So for the first site, we have mobility enhancements. We'll look at what some of those look like later. Flooding prevention, the site 1 is our lowest lying area. Site 2, pedestrian safety and beach access. And site 3, again, beach access and shoreline management. And so these present really opportunities to combine future projects with potential improvements. So let's look at, some of these safe, access. This right now we're looking along Hermosa Avenue north, and there's a lot of blocking of pedestrian traffic, either by cars parked, and there's a lot of, as you may already know, there's a lot of driveways. So access is a challenge. And if we look up to 26th Street, we have some, I would call it some acute pedestrian safety challenges with the sidewalk. There's a crosswalk here in front of the stop sign. There's shrubs and other visual items that block visibility and safety. There's also a lot of low walls and kind of these paving inundations that prevent certainly ADA access and impair street safety. And this image again shows that similar condition. And then this image here is at 35th. And this is just this incredible location where you just have these high traffic volumes of pedestrians, bikers, walkers, and really you're required to head up and go down, or either go up or down the stairs. It's a big decision-making point and some conflict. And there's also, in the image you saw previously, you can see there was sand migration that moved, wind-blown sand migration that moves across the sidewalk that needs, right there, that needs to be swept. I'm pretty sure, Doug, you guys do it daily. And then the next image, it just shows people are walking their bikes up and down. So, so the goal is to combine these kind of goals for these sites and inscribe or imbued sea level rise resilience into some of these solutions. So the next slide is a description of really these two studies that we're doing. The hydrological study, which is basically looking at the storm drains, modeling our storm drains in these different events. And for that, we have a 10-year storm event. And we also have different sea level rise scenarios. And so really the main thing to notice about this slide, this is really the porous draining area within our study. And sea level rise problems, they're compounded. And but remember, we're looking at some inundation here, street level inundation. That's at 6.7, and that was a 1 in 200 chance of happening by 2100. But this is, that's the study. This is what we are looking at here. So I think that's really the important thing to notice about this slide. The next slide, we have zoomed in a little closer from Toronto to Beach. And this is where we combine, what are some of these areas of safety constraints, street narrowing or accessibility constraints. And again, these are some different scenarios that are long-term for rainwater flooding, seawater, and also seawater inundation potential. The next site here, this is at 26th, and really there are no existing flooding issues that are impacted, and they're really not. So up along Hermosa Avenue, let me back up. There is some minor street level flooding. You see there on the left of the screen. That happens now. That's the existing condition. But really, sea level rise doesn't impact these drains until you get above 6.7 feet of sea level rise. And this next slide zooms in a little more to look at the conditions that exist here and some of those challenges. This area we're looking at now is 35th, is perpendicular to the ocean and the Strand, and also Hermosa Avenue. And there is some street level flooding now, some minor street level flooding now. And this does get impacted with sea level rise, but again, not to some of the more extreme scenarios for the flooding. And this is where we have two county, you'll notice 2 on here. We've got 2 drain outfalls. We have the county and the city outfall. One is, close to the water line, and the other is a lot closer to the strand. And really the biggest challenge here is accessibility. Transitioning from the Hermosa Beach section of the strand up to the Manhattan Beach section of the strand, and conflict that happens between some pedestrians, bikers, different modes of transportation here. And there is, of course, some flooding impacts in this area.
All right, thank you, Jenny. That was great. So as promised, a lot of initial data. These are initial findings that Jenny and the team have started to develop about what impacts might look like from potential levels of sea level rise. And again, these are pretty far out estimates time-wise and pretty low levels of chance, but nonetheless, this is the task before us to study. But again, looking at how potential impacts in the long run might affect public infrastructure and those considerations, not just on the beach, but into other streets, public and private spaces. So wanted to just pause here again and speak to, we have a couple questions for you, as you can see on screen here. We wanted to know from you, which issues, as you've seen this initial set of findings of data, which issues related to flooding and public infrastructure are of greatest concern to you? And that you may feel there's some that are citywide based on what we're seeing so far, but also to the specific sites at Hermosa Hondo 4th, Site 2 at 26th and Hermosa, and Site 3 at 35th Hermosa and kind of the Strand intersection there. So we'd love to hear from you about specific issues on those specific sites, and then any additional issues related to flooding, public infrastructure, and that can be either what you've seen or experienced today in the near, or you expect in the near future, or even in the long term. Any other considerations you think should be kind of put in the mix here, as they say, for the study. So we'd love to hear your answers to these questions. Please, so again, we'd love to hear from you through the Zoom chat. If you want to type in there, if you'd like to speak over the microphone, we can go ahead and unmute we can unmute you if you'd like to speak. You can use the blue raise hand function and the reaction side. And so good, I see a few things coming in. So what I would like to start with, we had a question from Scott in the chat, and then a question from Pratik, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And then we'll come to Craig, who wanted to speak over the audio. So Scott's question is, does this study have any tie-ins to the infiltration project that was previously planned for the Greenbelt? I'm guessing, Doug, that might be a question you could field. Is that?
Sure. Yeah, no, of course. And thanks, Scott. No. I mean, these are completely separate, identified separately than, the Greenbelt project, which of course has been canceled. Is there a loose, indirect tie-in to a project like that? Absolutely. These infiltration projects, such as the Greenbelt, but other ones not only in Hermosa, but upstream in Torrance, Redondo, wherever, all potentially have the ability to reduce the storm water flow that would get to these outfalls that we're addressing with this project. So, all this stuff is connected kind of in different ways, but specifically these 3 sites, this grant funded project has nothing to do with the Greenbelt infiltration. These are all
right
downstream from that and wouldn't tie in even if it was there. So
great, thank you, Doug. And then Pratik's question is, would tsunamis factor into the modeling of flooding risk due to climate change? And do we have any initial information about which areas of Hermosa are more vulnerable related to tsunami? Jenny, any initial thoughts on that, or maybe that's a question Chris can answer? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think certainly it is a big, you didn't ask if it was a big deal, but it certainly is a big deal because we're right, 26 is right there on the tsunami evacuation zone. So I think one piece of that does play into this is maintaining looking at emergency access routes to maintain during these tsunami events. But I don't know, we are not particularly looking at tsunami events, but I don't know. We've got, so it's not just me, you're not only hearing from me today. We've got a really great team of hydrological engineers here. And Weijia, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, tsunami hazard is not included in the sea level rise assessment or previous flood assessment. Tsunamis has, it is a hazard, but it has much longer return period in terms of the likelihood that could happen. For example, the ASCE manual looking for a return period more of 2,500 year period. And the California Geological Survey, you may see from the news, just released the most recent map on a week ago. They're looking into a return period of 1,000 years. So the short answer is it's not included in this assessment.
And Weiship, the other point that I think we can make is that tsunami hazard isn't really related to climate change, as far as I know. It's more of a tectonic and seismic activity and submarine landslide activity factor or effect, not so much climate change.
That is right.
Weijia and Chris, thank you. So as Jenny noted, Weijia and Chris are part of our broader team who are assisting in conducting this analysis. So we want to thank them both. They're here to further answer questions. So let me, Craig, I see your blue hand up. Thank you for using that. We're welcome. I think you can go ahead and you should be able to go unmute yourself. If not, we will unmute you. There you go. Yeah. Craig, please, what was your thought or question or comment that you might have?
Yeah, third time's a charm on the unmute. Thank you for letting me comment. I would think that, and this is related to climate change, that it's important to factor in the increasing severity of storm action. And I say that because I used to live at 27th and the Strand, and I remember very vividly the 82, 83 El Nino events where the water came all the way across the beach. I was renting a unit to live in and then had one above the garage for my office. But downstairs where I was living was the kitchen, which faced the beach. And I had to sandbag the kitchen door to keep the ocean from coming into the kitchen. In fact, it did. And then I had to go out and I got dinged by folks because I was taking sand off the beach for that, and turned out that's illegal. So I had to go to the City Hall parking lot to get sandbags. But it's very vivid memory of water all the way across those very wide beaches. And this was out without sea level rise. So we know that the climate change is fostering more intense storm action. So even at these lower levels of projected sea level rise, I think there's going to be an additional impact of storm action that's stronger than it has been historically. And that definitely needs to be addressed. And I think citywide, but these particular sites and the 26th Street site in particular, since I'm most familiar with that. But that's my input on that part.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
We also, and we recognize too, as part of the study, that while we're, as Jenny explained, these are some pretty far-reaching, estimates, time estimates, and chances are relatively low. These scenarios. That said, it has happened before, and there's anticipation it will happen again, as you were describing your experiences, Craig. So, wanted to acknowledge that and know that, and I think the city, everything we've heard from cities so far, and I think Doug would agree that this is an important exercise for us to think about, again, where those potential impacts, where we know those impacts have happened, where impacts may continue to be stronger or more significant, and how we can start thinking about potential measures to address those. So thank you, Craig, appreciate that. And I wanted to acknowledge Scott had an additional comment in the chat, if you hadn't seen, about Hermosa, to your perspective, Scott, seems to be most vulnerable. and maybe prioritizing there. And totally appreciate your full disclosure there that you'd be impacted. So, in all seriousness, so no bias presumed there. That's a significant impact. So thank you for sharing that. That's important for us to hear. So so other comments or questions that you have along, again, with the data Jenny and team have presented so far, or any questions we can answer about the assumptions, welcome to put those in the chat, or if you'd like to come off mute to ask a little bit more, that'd be great. But I think with that, why don't we move ahead, and we can come back to this data if anyone has any follow-up question a little bit later. But we want to also think about, while we're starting to collect data on the findings about impacts, what are potential improvements, measures that we can take to address these impacts and mitigate them to the extent possible. So I think what we're gonna do with that is I'm gonna turn to back to Jenny, and she's gonna go through a few more slides for us here to kind of talk about some perspective about what those improvements could potentially be. And again, we wanna open up to hear back from all of you about your impressions of the potential for these improvements. So Jenny, let's bring you back and move forward here.
Thanks, Andy. And I'm gonna go back just 1 second. And I didn't know, based on Craig's question,
Oh,
I
please.
didn't know, Chris, if you wanted to add anything about, or Wasia, about the storm situation, the selection of what storm was modeled. I know we used a 10-year hydrograph for the storm drains, but really for the sea level rise scenarios, we didn't combine it with storms.
That's correct.
So, Chris, maybe let me cover that part. So for the hydrological modeling we did, what we did was we look at a 10-year storm occurring on not the highest tide, but is close to mean higher high tide. So that's what we modeled. And in terms of sea level rise, we looked at the in a way, Cosmos use metrics. So it's a 1 meter, 2 meters, and 5 meters. So in terms of, in the custom units, it's 3.3, 6.7, and 16.4 feet. So those were the 3 sea level rise scenarios we considered in the modeling. Basically, we raised the ocean tide elevation up by the sea level rise amount in the hydrological modeling analysis.
Right.
And then also to add to that, we did a sea level rise assessment using Cosmos, just purely for sea level rise potential threats. And we considered a dry season condition, which means it's simply a no storm condition. It's just high water with average waves. So we can go back and look at Cosmos because they do consider oceanographic storm conditions for wet weather conditions, winter conditions, and we can identify whether there's any difference in the sea level rise footprint. But my sense is it won't be terribly different, but I'll tell you that 1982-83 storm experience is super valuable because it's a real life data point, an empirical data point that potentially could be a precursor of what we could expect in a distant future time frame. So thanks, Craig, for relaying that.
Good.
All right, thanks for the diversion or elaboration.
No, excellent. Yeah, glad you brought that back, Jenny. Yeah, thank you. Good. Okay. Go ahead, Jenny, please.
Okay. All right. So the next slide is and this is where we want to hear from you as well, is what benefits. So what are these added benefits of these potential improvements that we want to see? So, how do we, as Doug mentioned, how do we wrap in other sources of funding to achieve other city goals to get some new infrastructure where we might need it? And so we're looking at pedestrian safety, mobility improvements, clean water, different environmental improvements, including habitat and ecosystem service improvements, stormwater management, and coastal protection. Those are what those icons are. And so this is really this is, I guess, some of our toolkit. And you may say, okay, we're just talking about storms, El Nino and seawater level rise. Why are we looking at crossings? But basically, some of these improvements can help get the other hard work done that happens under the paving. And that's why we're looking at some of these improvements. So really, I think we are looking at, the study is looking at class 2 designated bike lanes, what you see here, class 3 shared bike routes. You know, we've got those in Hermosa now. That picture is from Hermosa. But also class 4 separated and protected bicycle lanes. The one, you know, we've got wonderful ones already in Hermosa Beach, but maybe those get extended. And, you know, pedestrian safe crossing, lining those up with stop signs, of course. Show, you know, these decorative, you can have traffic calming and prioritizing pedestrian traffic here along the bottom, sometimes night crossing, and also safe pedestrian crossings with these refuge islands. I know a lot of the street is sort of a turtleback, so the water is draining to either side of the street, but in some places surface water could drain towards medians here in the middle that can double as protective areas for pedestrians. And so those types of interventions have the added benefits of different environmental and stormwater benefits. And this next one here we're looking at is bio infiltration and bio retention. The image you see on the left, it's essentially a depression that can collect and store, you know, a certain volume of stormwater. And you can see there's perforations and curbs that allow some of that stormwater to enter into these planters. That's bio infiltration. Rainwater harvesting is another great approach. There's typically, these are tanks that are stored underground. They can store a certain volume of water. And in the image you see on the right, that's a project in Santa Monica we just finished maybe a year ago, where that water is stored temporarily and then it's used to water plants. It's treated and used to water plants. There's also underground infiltration galleries, which you see there at the bottom. And what these do, they can collect stormwater. So they reduce that volume of stormwater, they hold it, and then release it either into the ground for infiltration. As you see here, basically the image on the right, this is one of my colleagues, Wendy's projects, and that's what it looks like, covered up and planted on top. Under there are those infiltration galleries. And then the next image on the right, these are tree filters and rainwater interceptors. They're basically sort of these structures that hold street trees in a certain soil profile, so you can temporarily store some of the stormwater. And that's what you see on the right. Okay, next slide. So there's a lot of other potential improvements for stormwater management. And the image on the left, this is infiltration again with street side stormwater planter, but also permeable paver. That's what's lining the parking area, is actually permeable paver. And then this image on the right, that's permeable. That's a permeable paver as well in the middle. That's a more permeable paver. And then these planters, yeah, that image there you had at the top right. Those are curb cuts that also are planters, stormwater planters. And then of course, urban greening. I don't know about you, but we all love trees. We're just learning the value of our trees. And, you know, in addition to cooling, they also slow down stormwater. They dissipate as the rain falls. They can act somewhat to dissipate stormwater, provide evaporation and some of that water uptake. And they can also contribute to the beauty and the economic viability of our communities. So the different potential measures for coastal management. So these are kind of hard armoring solutions. These would be defensive solutions. against some of these really sort of more extreme scenarios. There's seawalls. You can see the one. This is again the image on the left there. Yeah, Joey, is Long Beach. This is in the middle image is also a seawall. But what you can see here that's important to note is that not only does it diminish access to the ocean, the seawalls, and they're not favorable, but we lose that intertidal, that whole intertidal zone is lost when it comes up with this hard infrastructure of a seawall. And that's the zone, that transition zone is really a biologically rich area. And also on our team, we've got Dave Hubbard, who's hiding in the area here. We'll get to him soon, talking about some of that biology and ecology that happens in that intertidal zone. But there's a seawall flooded on the right. And also, you know, as I think it was Stephen mentioned, the Horondo area is very low lying, probably, excuse me, a first priority. And that water is coming from Redondo Beach, really. That's where that water is entering and coming from. And maybe a possible solution are floodgates. Those are provide temporary protection. These are both in Napa. These are in Napa, California. Or riprap is another sort of less hard, but another hardening solution. I'm sure we've seen. So let's see, 651. Okay. Some other potential measures for coastal management are really these softer solutions that are at least based on natural processes. And the first are these temporary sand berms, the image on the left. This is the mechanical placement of sand. You see it in your community every winter. These berms are built up, knocked down. And they are based, however, on natural process or a softer solution than a seawall. And then also there's beach nourishment, of course. And the diagram, this again, a mechanical placement of sand. So you've got some spoil site somewhere where this dredge is sucking up sand from, spitting it out somewhere else. That's what you see on the right as well. That kind of process of beach nourishment. It can be expensive. It's less expensive than seawalls, but it's also requires mechanical placement of sand. And that sand too, that beach nourishment sand can get lost. There is there's a valley under the ocean where some of that beach nourishment can get lost. And however, we have this other option that really also mimics natural processes, which are vegetated sand dunes. This image is on the left is at Morro Bay. This is incredible mosaic that really holds the sand in place, and it builds protection. It's a natural protection over time, and it's also a place where these really incredible things happen, and habitat can get developed. This is on your neighbor north of you. The image on the right is at not Marina del Rey. It's close to Marina del Rey. That's a sand dune project just north of you. And so like I mentioned before, is, you know, beach nourishment requires mechanical placement of sand. It also can destroy the habitats that are there underwater. Next. And but what doesn't require mechanical placement are sand dunes, vegetated sand dunes, what you see here. This is Surfer's Point. This is a project our Dave Hubbard worked on, and it's incredibly successful. And it's based on a natural system. If you could go to the next slide. And essentially how that works is you have an existing sand that has vegetation on it, and you've got the sand deposition event that, and basically the vegetation grows in mass, and then it does it again. And it does it again. So you get new growth over time, and it can help really hold in the soil. It doesn't protect from that El Nino, but it can, these sand dunes can offer some sacrificial material in those big storms, and it can certainly protect in low. It's amazing to watch what they can do in a low elevation scenario. And so, and also some pretty cool things can happen there. Snowy plover might show up. And again, these are just to illustrate this range. Like we've looked at ranges of sea level rise, there's a range of solutions that we can look at. And so, like I mentioned, we've got a fantastic team, and we're looking at our next steps. We're looking at a living shoreline at the 35th Street location. And we understand there's a lot of constraints in that. And we've heard from stakeholders and community members of what those constraints are: visibility, access, emergency access and maintenance. We've got a couple outfalls and easements there. So it's a challenge, but really we've got a fantastic team to start to explore what this might look like.
Great.
This soft solution.
Thanks, Jenny, and again to the team for putting this information together. And we really want to pause here again and open up to engage with all of you about really on the improvement section as well. I mean, again, if any new questions that come up from the initial findings, by the way, happy to go back to those as you like. So I want to encourage all of you to weigh in and offer your thoughts. And let's come back to where Jenny just ended, if you will, kind of talking about these potential soft solutions. And I think, Jenny, as I really understood it, it's really much of this kind of speaks to that living shoreline concept, right? And I think if I understood you right, the team initially is thinking great opportunity may be at the 35th Street site for really looking at a living shoreline concept, for example. But again, we are still early in the process, and we'll do some design work still. So would really like to hear from all of you. And Craig, I see your hand up, which is great. Let me offer a couple questions for the full group, and then we'll start with you, Craig. We really wanted to hear from you to, as you look at the potential improvements that Jenny just has shared with you here, and based on your understanding of them so far, are there any in particular that are appealing to you specifically? So let's kind of start here, as you see on screen, with soft solutions. If I could, are there any of these options that are most appealing to you? But Craig, feel free to jump in with questions or comments on anything in general, Craig. I saw your hand up, unless you changed your mind and decided to hold off. You're welcome to unmute yourself. You should be able to unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
Always takes 3 tries to unmute, but yeah, I just took the hand down because I didn't want to jump the line here.
No problem.
But I've been involved with the Surfrider Foundation since 2002. I'm the South Bay chapter policy coordinator, and I've been heavily involved in quite a few projects, one of which is not one of my favorite things, was the Broad Beach Nourishment Project, where they attempted to come down to Manhattan Beach and, quote, borrow 600,000 cubic yards of sand, unquote. And, but they're also building a sand dune project at 28th Street in Manhattan. And I'm very much in favor of the soft solutions. These are not only beautiful, but they are effective, and they're good for humans and wildlife and plant life. And I really think that's the way to go. The experience that Broad Beach had with their beach erosion because of the riprap they put there, partially on state land, but, and some unpermitted things they did, moving sand up from Zuma Beach, shows that those hard interfaces do erode the beach. And as I think Jenny mentioned, we have the Redondo Canyon, where this sand is in a stream, heads towards the Redondo Canyon. And the breakwater in Redondo actually is what's holding some of the sand in Hermosa and upstream from there. So this is really the answer, and not the hard armoring of the coast. Surfrider as a policy is against hard armoring, and we believe in managed retreat. but personally, I think if you view any of these dune restoration things, they're strikingly beautiful and they're beneficial. And there's to the thought of in Hermosa Beach building any hard armoring for the multi-million-dollar houses that will be impacted first might be where everything is pushed, but I say we should early and in advance plan for these soft solutions to not only make Hermosa more beautiful, but also to have some sort of protection against what we know is coming, and to really fight the hard armoring of the coast.
Great. Thank you, Craig. Appreciate that. And let me offer a few reflections. And I wanted to share with the rest of the group, and I think you're familiar, Craig. I know you've been in touch with this process already, but the neighboring jurisdictions, the neighboring communities, the city is very much in touch with them to think about, what are the opportunities for, if there's a living shoreline concept, how can these work across our city lines? As we look at 35th Street, that's right at the edge of Manhattan Beach. So if Hermosa Beach does not look at these projects purely only within the city limits, but how can neighboring jurisdictions partner to support potentially bigger projects that cut across the city limits where appropriate. So those are definitely considerations, and I certainly hear your points too about grave concerns around use of more armored facilities as well. So Jenny, did you want to follow? Don't need to, but did you have any follow-up or on that? Or
I was just gonna add or clarify that, well, we've got great insight on our team, like Moffett, Nicole, and Chris, and maybe Matthew at Coastal Restoration Consultants. They're on our group. They're working on a lot of these different sand dunes that you like, Craig, that you're mentioning. They are currently working on these projects. We are going to apply those lessons learned. Every site is unique. But even at the Manhattan Beach, we're also working with the adjacent cities to get lessons learned and just keep sharing our knowledge and, pushing it forward.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I just want to echo that. Jenny's right. We've got a great team here working on similar projects. So we're going to be able to share a lot of lessons learned from what some other jurisdictions and cities have been trying. So let me skip around to some other images. Excuse me, I'm going the wrong way in the slides here. Let me go back just a couple slides. So, and Craig heard you loud and clear. I know, Jenny, you're not really in favor of the hard solutions, and Surfrider is not at all, virtually at all, but would certainly like to hear from any others, any thoughts or questions or thoughts around the hard solutions as well. And let me also reflect back on some of the other points. And Pratik, I see your comment in the chat, which is great. Thank you for sharing. The permeable road surfaces, really appealing to you. So thank you for sharing that. Would love to hear more about, why those are particularly appealing. If you want to come off mute and talk, that'd be great. Or if you want to put more comments in the chat, that'd be wonderful to hear. But certainly from others too. What about these kind of street level improvements? The infiltration concepts, urban greening, more trees overall. And let me go back again to another set here again, as Jenny went through the bio-infiltration, rainwater harvesting, tree filtering, rainwater inception concepts. I want to kind of bring these back and see if there's any in particular that are resonating with anyone, that they want to share any comments or ask any questions, if you like, about how these work, or kind of maybe where they've been used. As you can see, these are actual pictures of actual built projects. So these aren't theoretical tools. They're out there and working every day. So absolutely. So yeah, Pratik, absolutely. Those permeable surfaces great for the water table, less standing water during periods of flooding. Absolutely. So yeah, Craig, please come on back off mute. And what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so in relation to this, many years ago, I remember taking a busload of Hermosa Beach elected officials and some staff folks up to Santa Monica, and the city of Santa Monica gave us all a tour of their facilities that included the permeable pavement, the curb cuts, all the different things that city has done to capture water. And those are the things that I had hoped would pardon the pun, infiltrate the city council and hold on. None of the people back on council then are on council now, but I know them all personally, and I think there would be favorable ideas on this. Also, I serve on the Safe Clean Water South Santa Monica Bay Watershed Area Steering Committee, and I can say that if anyone has ideas to present those to the committee, we're going to start up our next year project examinations, and the 28th Street project in Manhattan was supported with Measure W funding. So there are opportunities, and thank you for mentioning when the cities can work together. And I think the public needs to be better aware that there are some funding opportunities and there are some more intelligent solutions that some neighboring cities, Santa Monica is especially advanced in that. But that's right, we need to look at other cities that have done it right, and also look at the opportunities that are available from some of the things our county supervisors so wisely put into effect and the voters approved. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I think you're right. I think we didn't, in this initial workshop today, in the kind of overview presentation, we didn't really speak to the opportunities to leverage other funding, that when we look at improvements like you're seeing on screen and other things, that very much so, it would be with the assumption and expectation that the city can leverage outside funds, whether those be local from this region, you mentioned Measure W, state, federal sources as well, that could potentially be brought forward to really speak to the lion's share of resources and funding that would be necessary, but potentially from local sources as well. So, so yeah, those are really important points. Thank you for highlighting those. Good, and Pratik, thanks for more additional comments in there. Scott, yeah, please go ahead and go off mute, Scott. I'll just reflect on what Pratik mentioned before you jump in. Yeah, you know, your thought about the vegetative and dunes, more kind of a natural long-term solution versus more manufactured. And yeah, trees are hard to argue with. But Scott, yeah, please, you should be able to unmute yourself. Go for it. Yeah.
So I thought that at least for the South Hermosa area, there was already some preliminary design work done, and there was going to be some permeable pavement and some, you know, some other methods for dealing with stormwater. Am I mistaken in that, or are we reevaluating that? What's the status on that?
I can take that one. Yeah.
Go ahead, Doug. Yeah.
Yeah, I can take that one.
There's Doug, yeah.
Yeah, so Scott, that's a separate project, obviously related. And that one is yeah, currently under design and engineering. So but it is specifically focused on stormwater. You know, it's a Green Street project. There's not really a direct climate adaptation or mobility component to it. And, you know, we've shaped that program in a way that it can happen, serve its purpose and be successful. And then this design can come in on top of that. And so MIG is very aware of that other project and is kind of factoring that into their work. So separate but connected, and really ideally will compound upon each other in a good way. So
yeah, I just saw that the areas of focus were almost identical to the Green Streets project, and it seemed like they were similar, if not the exact same thing.
Yeah, same spot, but slightly different, and again, aware of each other and working together, you know.
Yeah. Scott, if you don't mind, just since you kind of have the mic, you know, virtually at the moment, speaking of kind of street level, you know, when we think about mobility overall, so whether it's bike lanes, pedestrian level crossing, or other changes at the street level, is there anything that kind of resonates with you that you know, think would be important, that makes sense to kind of connect potentially with sea level rise changes or infrastructure that we've talked about so far? Any thoughts on that? And you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, no, there's some background noise. You know, it's I think that most people are a little, and myself included, are focused a little narrowly, and what would help us the most today, and reconnecting the north end of the bike path without stairs. I think people are, and myself, are very interested in that, because it's something that that I can use today. It's not something that I'm worried about with a 1 in 6 chance after I'm dead. So so I think a lot of people, and I get a lot of questions about what's happening with this project regularly. So I think, although that might not be the most pressing from a sea level rise standpoint compared to what you showed in South Hermosa, I think you get people behind this one more readily.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate your thoughts on that. Would love to hear from others too, as we reflect back on the 3 sites under study here. What as we think about these potential opportunities, and I'll kind of briefly go back through these slides here. As we look at these areas under study, what are your thoughts about specific change, again, specific issue areas within each site that would resonate with the community, that you believe are priority? Maybe they're your personal priorities, maybe you're aware of others in the community, who have concerns and needs and ideas around change. Would love to hear your thoughts on that here too. And as Craig, as you noted here just in the chat now, ADA compliance, I think absolutely. I think any level of street level change, that is an opportunity and just truly a necessity for addressing any ADA lack of compliance the city may have in some of those specific sites. So it's another way to, again, further leverage, potential investment in preparing for sea level rise towards other needs in the community. So thank you. Yeah, we'd love to hear from others too, or Pratik, John, anyone else. Further thoughts about these specific locations, and I'm just gonna, again, briefly going through the slides here slowly of these site locations. Are there specific conditions in these locations that you're aware of that our team should be thoughtful about, when it comes to identifying potential design ideas as we move into the next phase? Any other specific thoughts, particularly from a location basis?
Maybe if I can jump in.
Please.
Yeah, the ADA thing on 35th Street, the stairs. I've carried bicycles up and down those stairs so many times I've forgotten. But if you're wheelchair bound, you're out of luck. And I have a very good friend who's confined to a wheelchair, and he's tried for years to gain more access. And as he always says it, if you can walk there, I should be able to roll there. So, but you can't, the stairs there are a hard barrier. And I've seen people struggle, even people who are healthy, getting up and down the stairs, like on a hot day carrying a bike. So those aren't very user friendly. And some of the access points farther down have planters in the way of the walk streets and things like that that are just not pedestrian nor bicycle, and absolutely not wheelchair friendly. So I think that should be a core design thing, so it's just built in and you don't have to think about it after the fact. And I think it's really important because we need to consider everybody to have equal access, and from a design standpoint that clearly wasn't there when these things were put in place. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Craig. Appreciate that. Good.
And
excellent. Jenny.
I would like to add to that too is, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but the city was smart in combining these projects, because we did bring this up recently. We had a stakeholder meeting with the Coastal Commission, and that's a tough pill to swallow, more concrete on the beach. And that speaks to the combining of efforts required to get these kinds of projects done, and including the living shoreline solution.
I want to jump in on that. We aren't advocating more concrete on the beach. In fact, I'm opposed to that. What I would like to see are these stairs gotten rid of and electric wheelchairs being made available, so people in a wheelchair can go anywhere on the beach where their friends are and not be confined to mats, and absolutely not be confined to a sidewalk built out on the sand. So I think we're missing the ball on that part, and I'm going to try to help my friend put a plan together on that. But I absolutely agree. It's not right to put an access cement walkway out on the sand. It's just wrong. It doesn't belong there. And the temporary mats are only a temporary solution. So I think there needs to be more innovative thinking. And I suspect there could be funding sources for this, that, you know, if somebody wants their logo on an electric wheelchair, sure. But that would dictate that we wouldn't need to build those unusual structures on the sand to restrict the sand's natural properties. So I had to jump on that, sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Craig. Appreciate the comment. So good. And Pratik, thank you. Yeah, community engagement, community input, and concern about previous projects that have or have not occurred due to resistance. So we'll be, as we described, and hopefully you've gathered here, we're definitely in the early stage here of this effort. We still have more work to do. This team will be working hard to reach out beyond a public workshop like this to connect more with stakeholders in the community, particularly around these specific sites, more closely to look at the opportunities, concerns, issues, and how we can explore different improvements, you know, that can meet localized needs in some of these locations specifically. So Pratik, thank you for that comment. We agree. It's going to be important for engagement and transparency. So good. So any further thoughts here? I'm just kind of, you know, briefly again, cycling through the potential improvements. I want to keep it open here. We're doing well on time. We have as late as 8 o'clock. We won't go as late as 8 if we've kind of heard from everyone tonight. And by the way, you know, there will be, as Joey posted in the chat, if you scroll back up in the chat, you'll see the information at the city's website for where you can stay in touch on the project. This is certainly not the last opportunity. We've got more to come. But I wanted to just, yeah, kind of check in with you here with our remaining time. So anybody else have any further thoughts here on these potential improvements? Yeah, Craig, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have so many things I'd like to share. But with the modes of transportation morphing going into the future, I think we need to be very smart about that. And some of these things shown here are smart. You know, the protected bike lanes, the sharrows, the alternative modes of transportation. So it isn't all paved, car-oriented type infrastructure. So I think the blending of all these is critical in early planning. And I don't believe we're going to change back to everything's done in a car phase. And also build in, like, you know, bus lines or things like that, so there are mass transit capabilities of fitting in with the infrastructure, and charging stations, things like that, that I think are all combined a very smart way to move forward. And also, as you can see in these pictures here, it can look very beautiful. It doesn't have to be some tacked on, you know, somebody threw some paint on the street, but it can be done in a very attractive way and serve a lot of different functions. So I think it needs to be multimodal focused and future focused, so we can, you know, better anticipate things as people want to spend more time in the environment.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. Yeah, I think that very much, and there's I want to come to John's question in a moment that he just put in the chat, but hear your point loud and clear, Craig. It's an opportunity to think about broader mobility needs in the community. Again, leveraging potential improvements related to sea level rise can support other mobility priorities in the community as well. So, so I think that's very much a principle that the city is going to keep in mind as we look at design options moving ahead in this study, to think about those kind of multi-benefit approach is one way to look at it. So, and I wanted to ask the team, John posted a question about, what about creating a separate bike lane next to the Strand for safety purposes? Is that something that is there any reason we can't look at that as part of this study?
I don't know. My first reaction would be it's a little outside the scope of this, but if there is a way to look at that, that'd be interesting. Maybe we can talk about that on the side.
Good. Yeah, we'll challenge the technical team to look at that. How can we keep it within the bounds here of the scope, and what could that look like? How can it have broader benefit as well? So thinking, and as Craig said, Manhattan's doing that well as well. Good. So John, David, thank you for that comment. I wanted to do a quick, so still happy to get more comments coming. I'm going to do a quick shift of the slides here. I'm going to show you a different screen. Our colleague Joey Nielsen here with our team, he's been taking notes behind the scenes as you've all been chatting, and he's been kind of tracking those specifically. I'm going to zoom in here and show you. It's like a digital whiteboard is one way to look at it. He's been taking your notes that have been coming in and recording those here. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. To Product's point about transparency, we want to make sure we're capturing all the rich comment and discussion here today, and he's doing a great job of doing that for us. And he's got notes to specific locations where he's been able to capture those. So I want to just acknowledge that and thank Joey for that. But yeah, any additional thoughts here about these potential improvements, and again, that perspective of kind of connecting different needs and opportunities, whether that be mobility, environmental, economic development, and more broadly in the city, stormwater improvement, a lot of these changes, greening of the city. Are there other specific, maybe within the 3 sites that we're studying, that anyone would suggest we should look at closely with the design concepts?
Well, I personally think it's a wonderful opportunity to accomplish a number of different things simultaneously that we probably couldn't do without the pressures of things like sea level rise. And also, when you look at the pandemic outcomes where we've got outdoor seatings for restaurants and making it more people getting out of their cars and interacting. So I think it makes more sense to keep that perspective in place, even though that may switch back and go to these, let's hurry through the city. But if we have these things that slow people down, get them out of their cars, can enjoy the environment and build it in as part of this response to sea level rise, to me, that's a win-win situation. And it may not happen any other way because of, the expense involved and the construction and inconvenience it may put temporarily. But I think re-envisioning these areas as more people-friendly and is the way to go. And I think that can build right in with the sea level rise infrastructure ideas.
Great, thank you. Very good. All right. Well, again, I want to just checking with the group here. We're playing well time. I think it's safe to say we can probably wrap up before 8, given that we've been a tight group here and we've covered a lot of topics. I'm not officially cutting us off now, but maybe let me suggest we'll wrap up in about 5 or 10 minutes, if that makes sense to everybody. So maybe close to a last call here. Any additional thoughts on any of our topics here tonight that anyone wanted to share? Additional ideas and input, and again, thinking about design opportunities coming down the line that you'd like to see, you want to ask, we can try and consider in the study. Craig.
Well, yeah, the stormwater capture is a big thing for me, and we have all the storm drains emptying out into the ocean. I am a big fan of capturing that water and either infiltrating or cleaning it and reusing it. And it's the same reason I am very much behind West Basin's recycled water plant. And I think rather than just figuring out a way to keep the storm drains running when the seawater backs up into their openings, to rethink that, to do infiltration. Also, I have pictures of the beach covered in black from tire dust off PCH from 16th Street in particular. And the city used to flush the storm drains and don't do that anymore for financial reasons. But if that could be captured like the Strand infiltration project that's already in place and using the storm drains down Pier Avenue and the infiltration thing right along the Strand underneath the sand is brilliant. In fact, the city got an award for that. And more of that, I think, needs to be built into this because, yes, the sea level rise is going to back up the storm drains, and having that stuff wash out and the trash and bacteria and other inputs on the bay is something that even with catch screens, it doesn't get it all and doesn't get the bacteria. So I think there's a smarter way to do it, and pulling all those elements together, I think, are better than just saying, here's a little fix for this and we'll come back to it 50 years from now. So I think there can be some real breakthroughs that include the things that maybe are overlooked somewhat. So thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. And I think for those who are familiar, by the way, I know, Greg, I know you're well aware, you're really in this, but at the state level, there are, there's policy and requirements that all jurisdictions are required to, elevate their efforts around stormwater capture and how they treat stormwater before it returns to the ocean. So, that's a driver here as well. So a lot of what Craig was touching on speaks to that as well. So these will be ongoing needs the city has. And again, it's another opportunity for linking, kind of a multi-benefit approach. So thank you, Craig. Yeah, any other last thoughts? I know, Brandon, I see you joined a little bit late. We're really glad you're able to join. We went through a fair bit of information and we'll be happy to probably wrapping up in a little while here, but want to offer to you, if you want to go off mute and ask any questions, offer any thoughts, or you're welcome to put comments or questions into the chat as well. And I see Scott, so the median along the length of Hermosa, could that be a big infiltration system? Yeah, thoughts there from the technical team. What are the opportunities around that? I see Nathaniel. Maybe we'll start with Doug, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because I saw him go off mute, and then Nathaniel, maybe jump in. What are your thoughts first, Doug?
I'll give you what I think is the answer, and yeah, Nathaniel, you can elaborate or correct. But we're looking at that, Scott, as part of that already in progress Hermosa Avenue Green Street project. Water levels are real high there, so it's tough to do anything too big and too deep. But we are contemplating somewhat, maybe a smaller one, a shallower one. So it is an option, but there are some constraints, right?
Yeah, and just to add on to what Doug was saying, and the big constraints will be, the depth that we can make that system based, on geology and groundwater levels. But the other thing that we're working on doing right now is mapping for our 3 project areas, the locations of existing utilities. So that'll probably be the big factor into where those infiltration opportunities are feasible. But we're certainly going to be exploring opportunities to do that in the median or, under parking lanes. So.
Yeah, and also bioswales and curb cuts and things like that aren't necessarily infiltration because of the high water table there, but even those little things can really make a difference.
Great.
Yeah, and they can still treat stormwater even if they aren't able to infiltrate it into the ground. They can filter the water before it goes out into the ocean.
Great. Yeah, I think for those of us here who are familiar with kind of what's underground, under the street, under the sidewalk, there's quite the underlayer of our cities, our communities, right? There's a lot in there, utilities, sewer, all kinds of things. So those have to come into consideration as we look at potential, physical improvements. But just because a utility might be in a certain spot doesn't mean there's potentially an opportunity. It could be realigned to open up space, with cost considerations in mind, of course. But yeah, I know these are things the team will be identifying as we develop some design concepts in the coming months here. So Good. Yeah, thank you. Great. Appreciate that question, Scott. Good. Would love to answer any additional questions or just hear those ideas that all of you may have about potential locations for such improvements. Any additional kind of last questions or thoughts here before we move into talking about next steps on the project?
Andy, do you mind going back to hard solutions for the coastal armory?
Certainly, yeah.
I just wanted to pick up on one of Scott's questions. I don't know, Scott, if you're still on or.
Yeah, he's still here. Yeah, please.
So I was looking in the chat, you're in that zone of Hermosa in the low lying zone. And, you know, something like temporary floodgates could be a partial solution for the water that's coming from the south, coming from Hermosa. But was this like just testing the waters? Was it be too drastic? I mean, these are big, expensive, obviously measures, but I was just wondering if this seems too drastic. This is in line. This would make you sleep better at night. I was just wondering if you're still there, if you wouldn't mind commenting on that.
I mean, you know, if the water's coming, nothing's too drastic. I mean, they have a big system in Venice to take care of rising waters there that worked sometimes, I guess didn't work others. You know, I don't know, you know, I don't fully understand where exactly these would go in the system, but, you know, my other question is, how is what happens at the electric plant going to affect us? Are they going to raise that area up, and is that going to push water this way? You know, there's a lot of factors. So I'm all for whatever keeps my garage as a garage and not as a underground pool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Understood. Yeah. So we'd have to see it first. You have to see it first a little more specifically to better understand. But I think did we capture the question about provide a response to the question about the work at the electrical plant that was brought up? I'm asking a question to Martine. Did we cover that?
I would be happy to comment on that. That plant, I assume you're talking about AES Redondo, and
right.
We're trying to get that plant shut down. There's comments due on the 16th about extending the permit on that plant. It was supposed to be shut down on December 31st of 2020. It got extended 1 year. Now they're looking to extend it another 2 years. But there are many, many groups working to stop that. It's the oldest and most inefficient of the dinosaur power plants, and it's heavily polluting. It's slow startup, and it really needs to go away. So we're hoping that whatever happens, even if the permit is extended till 2023, after that, it's got to go away. So I think people should start thinking about going away and what would go in its place. And that's a outstanding opportunity. And it's not just Redondo Beach. It's obviously a neighbor directly to Hermosa Beach. So there are huge opportunities with that. And I think the thinking has to be, what do we do when it goes away? Because it is going to go away. And okay. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And Scott, you probably gathered Craig was kind of speaking on behalf of the Surfrider Foundation on those perspectives on that project. But I do want to bring this back to the team. Jenny, you probably know who could answer this better. If that facility goes away, do we have the ability right now to do any sort of estimating about changes in potential flood flows, I guess, for lack of a better term? Or is that is our team able to do that? Is that an exercise we can do, or a little bit beyond what we can do with the scope? Or maybe there's no difference.
It's it's in our mod. It's shown in our flood mod. It's low. It's a low area. I'm not sure how, you know, that future removal would impact. I don't know, Wager or Chris, if you're still on, do you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I would think, I mean, if they do anything there, they'll have to implement all the latest LID requirements and stormwater. But at the same time, that site is so permeable overall already. It'd be interesting to see if there would even be much change, you know? I mean, besides the plant, a lot of it is just dirt and open areas. So, yeah, I don't know. It might be outside the scope of this, but
It's clearly outside of the scope of this. However, it would really depend on what's proposed after the power plant is removed on that site. Is it upland? Is it lowland? Does it vary in its topography? Would it cause modification to drainage, so surface drainage and subsurface drainage? That stuff would have to be determined in order to know how it would affect infiltration and other things.
Okay, so it'll be something we can at least note as in this study that we're aware of potential changes, and it's at least a consideration if it's not able to be studied closely during the time of this effort. We can at least perhaps make a reference to it for future study and consideration, you know, for future when potential improvements come down the line. So thank you. Great questions. I want to go ahead and suggest that let me bring Jenny back. Jenny, if you're okay, let's talk about next steps briefly, and talk a little bit more about what everybody can look forward to in terms of design concepts and what that process will look like and what we'll be studying, and then we can talk schedule-wise next steps and answer any last questions from our attendees here. So Jenny, want to take it back here and walk us through these remaining slides?
Sure, I think maybe progress one. We have a slide for next steps.
Yeah, sorry, let me skip the.
There we go. So for the next steps right now is we'll be moving into draft conceptual design and looking at what do these different toolbox items look like in these areas, where are they feasible for the city of Hermosa Beach and for both the living shoreline and the green infrastructure. Once we've produced a draft of the conceptual design, we go to our public workshop, our next public workshop, where we present that to the public for feedback on that draft, and we do further refinements and have a final conceptual design third workshop. And note, in between all these, we're going to be having additional stakeholder meetings as well. And then at the next, we produce a cost benefit report, you know, what's the cost of doing nothing included, and then a funding source report. So those are really our next steps through the end of January 2022. Great. And I think this previous slide just showed, I think, you know, the conceptual design, it's not a project that's, you know, we're not producing documents to go and build some discrete new infrastructure, but it's really a draft conceptual design that sort of imagines what it might look like. This, you know, it's not this is just a sketch, really a visual sketch of what some of these improvements might look like. And then in that process too, of course, it's an iterative process of asking, you know, do these solutions, do these interventions solve the problems, reduce the vulnerability, are they supported by the community, leadership? These kinds of questions are what we're going to be asking all along that design process.
Good, excellent. So to that end, you know, as Jenny noted, you know, important next step will be looking forward to coming back to meet with you and the rest of the community in September. We're going to continue to get the word out and make sure folks are involved. We'll be doing some one-on-one outreach with some key community members, but the broader community too. We look forward to conducting in a similar workshop to this. So want to just ask any last questions on next steps for the project team before we want to respect everybody's time tonight and make sure you can go off and have a little bit of an evening before turning in for the night. Any last questions or comments for the group here before we say goodnight?
I just want to comment. I appreciate the asking for input and the different ideas and alternatives shown. That shows, you know, it's not just a one idea, it's a broad scope of ideas. And I really appreciate this sort of approach. And Doug, good job. And this is the sort of way I think is the best way for the city and visitors going forward, is to look at all the options and to come up with the best practices going forward, knowing that the world is different and it's going to continue to change, but we can do things smarter going forward. And I really like this approach. And I think you've done a good job on this workshop. So I just wanted to express thanks.
Thank you, Craig, and really appreciate all the thoughts you've offered here tonight. So all the others, Scott, Pratik, John, great comments and questions. We really appreciate those. It's really important to help us make sure we're thinking holistically and broadly, you know, about the just really the full range of opportunities and considerations with this study. So, you know, with that, let me go ahead and Doug, if you don't mind, I'll let me offer thanks to everybody here for all this, all your time here tonight. We really appreciate it. Really do want you to stay involved and connected to the project. Please do make sure you're signed up on the city's website for email updates, such. It's one way we're getting word out, as well as through social media. The city's, I believe it's Facebook and Twitter feeds, for example, Instagram. So please do stay in touch with those links. And so I'll say thank you for that. But Doug, any last thank you, closing remarks here before we send everybody off?
No, hey, thank you to MIG for running this, and thanks to everybody for showing up. You know how to get a hold of me. I mean, we have a project page for this on the website, but any other questions, issues, whatever, moving forward, you know, everybody please reach out to me, and look forward to the next steps and seeing some pretty pictures, you know.
All right, yeah, some design concepts. So if you look in the chat there, again, we posted the link to that project website, the web page, I should say, on the city's website. So please do stay in touch with that and keep in touch in that way and reach out as needed. So with that, we'll say goodnight. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and shut the Zoom off in about 30 seconds here and cut everyone off. But otherwise, thank you and have a good evening. We'll look forward to staying in touch with you in this process. Good night, everybody.
You all. Good night.
Good night.